Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Shaw, and you've tuned in to the 2021 New Year's special of Vanguards of Democracy. On today's episode, we'll be taking time to recount some of the amazing guests that we've had the honor to host on our show and to share their optimism for the new year. But first, I'm joined by Natasha Nascimento, founder and CEO of Redefining Refuge, to sift through the muddy waters of human trafficking in Florida and learn about what needs to happen if we really want to purge this plague from our state. That interview is starting right now, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Vanguards of Democracy. This is Sean, and I'm here with Natasha Nascimento. Did I say that right?
That's right,
All
yeah.
right. I said it with my North Florida accent, but I appreciate you coming here, and this is going to be a great segment because, unfortunately, Hillsborough County is not unlike some other places in the country where we have a problem where this is concerned. And I want to talk about not only you personally, but kind of what you're doing in your mission and what your organization is doing. But I'd love for you to just give a short introduction, if you could, to our viewers and listening of who Natasha is.
Who is Natasha? So born and raised in South Africa. I'm a Portuguese South African with a Russian first name, so not confusing at all.
That's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. I've been in America for about 20 years. Originally went to school for economics, USF alumni, go Bulls. And this sort of started as a project for me, the whole human trafficking component. I had no idea children were being arrested for prostitution. And so I quit my finance career and started doing this full time. So I was in wealth management and then kind of got out of that.
Tell us what Redefining Refuge, that's your organization. Tell us what it does.
So we provide specialized services to children that are trafficked, specifically sex trafficking, sexual exploitation of children. So that could be pornography, any of those things. We provide intensive services to them. So it can be therapeutic, it can be advocacy, it can be medical, it can be educational, it can be all of the above. So we're just trying to, each child obviously is unique. They have very unique treatment plan goals. And so really just trying to meet the need of the child.
How does the child, or the victim in this case, find out about your services and your organization?
So it's a little bit difficult because they can't come directly to us. The way that things work in the state of Florida is that the reports come in either through the National Human Trafficking Hotline or our abuse hotline. And then they're coming to us through our sheriff's office, FBI, so law enforcement. The majority of the time is how the referrals are being made to our organization.
Okay, so law enforcement contacts you and then
Yes.
you contact the child?
So Child Protective Services is housed within the sheriff's office. And so it's really coming from Child Protective Services once they've been able to interview the child and kind of get a gauge on what the child's needs are, then that's where we sort of come in.
I mean, what does it mean for you to be the only, or first, I should say, holistic program for victims of human trafficking? That's a big deal.
Well, it was really difficult in the beginning. It was really, really difficult because we were trying to reframe an issue as a human rights issue that previously was looked at as prostitution. So again, when I started doing the work, I was in my finance position and I went to a Hillsborough County, it's a community alliance meeting with the Children's Board. This was in 2008, by the way, so this is a while now. And it's all of our stakeholders, our child welfare stakeholders. So I would certainly encourage people to go. They still have them once a month. And they were talking about child prostitutes in this meeting. And I had no idea what a child prostitute was. I've never heard that kind of language, I suppose, before. And so I'm like, what do you guys do with child prostitutes? And they said, well, what do you mean? Prostitution's illegal in the state of Florida, so we arrest them. And it just blew my mind. And so again, I said, well, I just want to be clear that I don't make up any rumors when I leave here. Kids that are being raped because they can't consent, when they see a law enforcement officer that they think's there to help, they're there to arrest them. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this. And they were like, well, they're involved in an illegal activity. So no one was getting it. And then I said, okay, what if it was a foreign kid? And they were like, well, that's totally different. That's trafficking. And so there was this horrible misconception that to be trafficked, you had to be from a foreign country, a foreign child from a foreign country, and they didn't recognize that this was something happening to their own children. So in the beginning, it was actually really, really, really difficult because we had to get all these people on board with reframing this issue. So
that's really important. I'm going to ask you something. I don't know how those that are arrested for prostitution, not the Johns, but the women, aren't the vast majority of them trafficked at a young age?
Yeah, so I have a really, really, really big problem with these stings that we do, and we actually did one during Super Bowl.
We did a lot of them during
in
Super Bowl.
Tampa, right? And so we have these press releases that say, "Oh, there were 74 arrests," as an example. And if you look through those arrests, we aren't arresting buyers, we aren't arresting traffickers, we are arresting marginalized groups of women who now have another charge or another thing on their record, makes it harder to get a job, harder to get housing. And a lot of those women, yeah, they were trafficking victims as a child. What happens if you have a 19-year-old that, in one of these stings and she gets arrested for prostitution, but a year ago she wouldn't have because she was a child.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And how do we think she got there at 19? It didn't just happen.
Right, exactly. It doesn't just happen. Certainly, there's lots of pathways to entry. Women that we know that are still currently sex workers, a lot of them, they were trafficked as children. So,
I mean, from my own point of view, and I know certainly from kind of the policymaker point of view, the language around this has changed in just a short amount of time, and how we feel about victims and how we feel about what we're calling these women, that they're not just prostitutes, that they are victims, and that this whole thing is a human trafficking issue that is creating all this. That you're right. In 2008, that wasn't the case. And here we are maybe in 2021, at least we're a little bit further along in that conversation.
Absolutely, yes.
That's a big deal. What, besides that, because I think that's a huge accomplishment, changing the stigma and the language around this, what are some other things that you're proud of that you've been able to do, or Redefining Refuge has been able to do?
Well, we've definitely had a lot of input in the beginning into legislation surrounding the children, so certification requirements for safe house programs. And we were the first safe house program in Hillsborough County. We were the first certified safe house program in the state of Florida. And so, yeah, I mean, we're very proud of I suppose, the input. And the best thing is that because I was from a finance background and not a social work background, everything that I learned from the kids. And so who better to tell you what they need than the kids? I had no preconceived notions of what they might need. And so I think a lot of success that we've had is because of our ability to listen to those kids.
Right.
And so implementing policy really on their behalf. So speaking on their behalf, not giving a voice to the voiceless, as people like to say. They have voices, no one's listening to them. So
right.
I'm most proud of that.
I'm remembering this now. When I was running for Attorney General, the most impactful event I ever did, or that I attended, I should say, was an event around human trafficking. And they had a victim that was up front, and you could tell the trauma in her voice and in her body language. It was if it had happened yesterday. And it was, I mean, she was petrified to be up there and even talk about it.
Well, then that wasn't the right thing to do, probably for her.
I had the same kind of feeling, like maybe she shouldn't be up here doing it. But
yeah.
I mean, you could hear a pin drop, and we were all kind of like, "This is
wow."
But I just can't overstate how important it is that the stigma has changed. That we don't lump everybody into the prostitution label, and we dig behind it. That's a huge deal when it comes to legislation and punishment and rehab or whatever we're doing.
Right. And I think on the adult side, I mean, we work with children. So for me, that's like very cut and dry. It's wrong, wrong, wrong. Kids can't be engaged in prostitution. I think on the adult side, where we have work to do is instead of arresting, is intervening first. Do you need services? Instead of arresting and then saying, do you need services?
Right.
What's the point of that? You know what I mean? I just made your life 10 times harder by arresting you. So I think we have work to do on the adult side with intervening before we just are blindly arresting.
Well, what are some other hurdles getting in the way of you being able to do your mission as well and as, wholesome as you want to do it?
I mean, I think some of the language still, this movement, the law only changed. Governor Scott only signed this into our legislation in 2013. And so we aren't even 10 years in, you know what I mean? So where domestic violence was maybe 30 or 40 years ago, that's kind of where this movement is. So it's a very baby movement. We're still learning. I think that policy has got to change around placements of children, licensing, foster parents. Some things that I'd like to see that change legislatively are children should absolutely, unequivocally, under no circumstances be forced to testify in front of a perpetrator. More often than not, we are dealing with children whose own parents are their perpetrators and they still love their parents. So how difficult is it to get up in front of a room full of strangers and testify against your parent? And so there's these little things that are extraordinarily destabilizing to the children that we serve that I think lawmakers could change. It doesn't cost any money, you know what I mean, to say they don't have to be in court. They can go to a place like Mary Lee's house as an example and do closed circuit testimony where they're being recorded, they're being seen in court, but they don't have to physically sit in court. So there's like these no fiscal impact laws that we could be passing that would really, really help kids, and we aren't doing those, not just yet. So.
Let me ask you how it works from a child's point of view. What's the usual route that this happens? How does it happen to a child? Like what type of child does it happen to, and what are the steps?
I'm so glad you asked what type of child it happens to, because it happens to all children, first of all. So there's this horrible misconception that it's, certain demographics of kids in certain neighborhoods. And that's not always true. We've had kids who come from households where both of their parents are physicians and they've been trafficked. And then we have kids that come from maybe a single parent family who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and it's happened to them. So one of the most important things that I think people should remember is that trafficking is the exploitation of a vulnerability. If I can find what your vulnerability is, it makes it easier to exploit a person. And so traffickers are skilled at identifying vulnerabilities. And so every kid has a vulnerability, right? It doesn't matter what your living situation is, what neighborhood you live in, all children have vulnerabilities. As an example, one of the kids that I mentioned who was trafficked to physicians, the parents were both physicians, her vulnerability ended up being that her dad had left her mom for a much younger woman. She wanted to get her dad back, and so she went and dated an older guy who ended up being a trafficker. So something that simple had this horrible unintended consequence, of course. And then about 50% of our cases, as I mentioned, are familial sex trafficking cases. And that's,
you said 50%?
Yeah, at least 50%. And that's when you see a parent or a primary caregiver that has a substance abuse problem and they sell their kids essentially to fund their habit. Mm-hmm. It's very common.
Why do you think Florida is such a battleground state when it comes to this trafficking issue?
Wow. Well, we're a destination state, first of all. We have beaches, we have convention centers, and we also have a ton of sports teams between sort of Tampa and Orlando. We have hockey teams, basketball teams, football teams, 2 baseball teams. And so whenever you see sort of large groups of men, that's where the demand is going to be, right? So we have a lot of demand here because, again, we're a destination. We have massive conventions that are occurring in Florida. And also we have so many massage parlors and strip clubs. At one point, I'm not sure if this is accurate anymore, but we had more strip clubs in Tampa than we had McDonald's. We actually had more strip clubs per capita than any other city in the country, even Vegas. So, I mean, when you have, these sexually oriented businesses all over the place, sure, that's going to be a breeding ground for trafficking.
I have a question, but I'm going to ask it near the end.
Yeah.
I'm going to tease a little bit. But because I remember being in the legislature when we were talking about some possible things to prevent human trafficking. And there was some corporate pushback.
Oh, yeah.
That was very interesting to me at the time and was very disappointing. But I didn't even think, because I'm like you, who could be against this? Let's just put it before the legislature. Let's do it. But nothing is ever that easy, even this topic, which is unfortunate. And who cares? I'm going to go there now. Disney.
Yep. I knew you were going to say that.
Had a huge problem with any human trafficking bill that included punishment for not knowing better. For example, Disney has a lot of hotel rooms. Disney has a lot of stuff going on. And Disney may also know better.
Right.
They know what's going on in some of these cases. And they refused to be a part of any legislation that might get them in trouble for doing anything other than playing a video that said, you ought to look out for these things. That was the extent of kind of what they wanted to do. And I was really disappointed that they fought that hard against, if underage people are utilizing the hotel rooms on a repeated basis, and you know what's going on, and you ought to have more of a more skin in the game than to just whoever's paying it is fine and we don't know what's going on.
Right.
And that's kind of what they were doing.
Yeah, look, that was very disheartening because the most magical, happy place on earth that's supposed to be all about children, they were our biggest opponent in getting that legislation passed. And they didn't want to be sued for any civil.
Right.
They wanted no civil cases, essentially, for kids being trafficked in their hotel rooms, and kind of turned it on the attorneys and said this is just a mechanism for attorneys to make money, which is the worst argument, the most ridiculous argument I think I've ever heard.
Any
honestly.
Argument that you're in the same boat as insurance companies and doctors that commit malpractice,
Right.
You're in bad shape. It's not, if you don't do wrong, you don't get sued. It's that easy.
Right.
And they knew they were doing wrong.
Yeah. And they won that.
Yeah, Disney ain't going to lose too many.
That happened twice, and that actually went on for 2 years, for 2 different sessions.
Disney's not going to lose too many battles up in Tallahassee.
And they won, yeah.
Unfortunately. What's the future look like for redefining refuge?
Well, we've actually expanded our services quite a lot. So before, when we started, we provided services only to biological females that were in the foster care system. So we've since been able to expand our services across all of our systems of care. So delinquency, dependency, community, diversion, boys, girls, anywhere on the gender spectrum. So just continue to grow in that direction where kids, we don't have limitations on who can have access to services and who cannot. Because
I was in a presentation where it must have been but it was all men in the audience, and the presentation was boys and men can be trafficked as well, and this is how it happens.
Right. So about 15% of the referrals in the state of Florida are for boys, and they were, you're very limited in being able to provide services to them in the beginning anyway, when we weren't even talking about this happening to boys, right? So we're, again, just continuing to listen, and as we listen, we learn, and then we grow in the way that we learn. So,
if you could go back, this is kind of a backward-looking question, but if you could go back to when you started this organization, what advice would you give yourself back then, knowing
run? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I think we all would say that to what we do now, but what advice would you give yourself?
Golly, what advice would I give myself? That's a really great question. Listening to the kids sooner than we listened, and not being so, just because you're an adult, it doesn't mean that you always know better for them. I didn't live what they lived, certainly. You know what I mean? So just because a book said that this is the way that we should sort of help with a mental health issue, or I wish we would have engaged them in dialogue sooner. I would have gone to them first and said, tell us how to build these programs, which is ultimately what happened.
Yeah.
But it was a year of really, really hard stuff to get to that point. So I could have saved myself
a hell of a question, right? Let's set aside the organization for a little bit and tell us any other philanthropy that you have going on in the community. Yeah.
So I actually serve on the board of the Heart Gallery of Tampa. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the organization. One of my favorite organizations in the world. So I'm super happy to be involved. We match children with forever families. So children that are waiting to be adopted by a forever family. We kind of match these kids with families. And then I also serve on another board. It's called Enriching Escapes. And we provide escapes to families that have children with special needs. So we found that a lot of the time, special needs families won't take a vacation because they feel really, really guilty that their child is missing like an imperative therapy. And so we created these escapes where the therapist goes with.
Oh, wow.
Mom and dad can have some respite. The kids are not missing any of their therapies. And so, definitely all centered around children, though.
What motivates you to do all this good stuff? How do you stay motivated to do all this?
Oh my gosh. Well, I grew up in South Africa, and we were very fortunate with how we grew up. But my parents, when they were little, were not as fortunate. And so we just grew up with a sensitivity to need, really. Unfortunately, South Africa is one of those places where you either, you have it or you don't have it kind of thing. And so whenever we would get clothes, we would always be giving away clothes. If we got toys, we'd be giving away toys. We're doing food drives, knitting blanket squares. So our parents always taught us to have just sensitivity to need, especially with children. So
what keeps you in Tampa? What's
I love Tampa.
I mean, we all do, but
it's a great city. Gosh, Tampa's been so good and kind to me. I feel like I was this foreign girl talking about this foreign problem in a lot of people's eyes. And just so many people were really, I don't know, they were just so kind. They've been kind to me, kind to the organization. It's been such a cool home away from home. And it's just, it's a special place to me, certainly.
It is. We all love Tampa.
Yeah.
If the audience wants to get involved more in redefining refuge, how would they do that? Do you have any, how can they give money? How can they get involved in the mission and all that good stuff?
So I'm going to take it one step further. Instead of just helping redefining refuge, something that everybody could be doing now to put a dent in trafficking is being mindful of their consumer habits. So there's a website, it's really cool. It's called Slavery Footprint. And you can go on there, put in your consumer habits, electronics that you're buying, jeans that you're wearing, all kinds of chocolate that you're eating, coffee that you're drinking. If we just consumed fair trade chocolate and fair trade coffee every day, we'd put a huge dent in trafficking. But we don't do that. So that would be my first thing. Second thing would be become a guardian ad litem if you're not one. We need guardian ad litems. We need mentors for kids, so big brothers, big sisters, the guardian ad litem program. Those are ways to circumvent a child from being trafficked in the first place. I always say that relationship is the actual transformation. It's not so much the service, it's the relationship with the person that's providing the service that can really help a kid. And then as far as our organization, it's kind of hard to have any hands-on volunteer opportunities. Our kids are involved in federal investigations. You need all kinds of training. We do have 2 big signature events every year. We have a Mommy and Me tea for all the moms and the littles that they can attend. And then we have our annual gala, which will be in October next year. So those are our 2 signature fundraising events. We always need committee members, silent auction items, sponsors, and then tangible items that you need for kids. Gift cards. A lot of our kids don't have insurance, so Walgreens gift cards, Publix gift cards, toiletries, blankets, all the things that you'd normally need.
And how would if I wanted to buy gift cards, how would I go about doing that, and who do I give it to? Is there an email address? Or
so you guys can send, I know like Amazon, most places you can just send a gift card online. So info@redefiningrefuge.org. That's a super easy way of delivering a gift card to us, and we'd be super grateful. We definitely use them all the time. Right. We never give our kids, obviously, cash for obvious reasons. And we don't like to give Visa gift cards as well, just so everybody knows, because kids can easily sell gift cards and purchase a phone or whatever the case is and get back in touch with their perpetrator and things like that. So it would be specific, like Publix, Walgreens.
And so we are winding down. I'm looking around the room here because we are going to have you back in October or sometime around then to hopefully talk about your event. But how do you have time for all this? Like, there's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff.
There's a lot of stuff. You know, a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm not married. I don't have kids, so that's probably
that's the answer I give everybody. How do I have time to do stuff well?
There you go. That's probably why.
We'll stop there. That's a good answer. Because the same answer I have. So, what are you? Give us a resolution that you're going to have for New Year's here while we wind up.
I'm going to try to make it home a little bit more next year. How about that?
Okay.
To South Africa. That's my resolution. To spend more time with my family.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I was talking to you before the show. I now know who to go to for South Africa recommendations because I had a trip planned and I had to reschedule it, but when I get it rescheduled, I'll ask for some advice here.
Absolutely.
So,
I'm happy to give it.
No, I appreciate it. Natasha, this was super informative, super interesting, and just great. We're going to have you back closer to your signature event. We appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And now we'll hear just a sampling of our compelling interviews from the year of 2021. For the full interviews, I encourage everyone to either watch past episodes on our YouTube channel or take our podcast on the road by streaming or downloading episodes from your favorite podcast streaming service. I'll be back in the studio on January 8th for our first live show of the year, and our first film episode will air on January 15th. And with that, I and the rest of our production team here at Vanguards of Democracy would like to wish our audience the best as we march confidently into the new year. Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you. And listen, Tampa took off with you as mayor. I mean, Tampa, from when you started to when you ended, the arrow is pointing straight up, and it's still going up. But you did a ton of stuff in this city, transformed downtown, transformed the riverfront, put into place all these other things. Like, what are you most proud of for the cool stuff you did?
You know, first of all, thank you. We were talking off air earlier that this is a radically different city than it was 10 years ago. And what I love best about what has emerged and what has occurred, surprisingly, it's not the bricks and the mortar. It is sort of that Tampa swagger.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're not losing our best and brightest kids to Charlotte or to Austin or to Raleigh-Durham anymore. Those young people are coming to Tampa, Florida. And when you walk around this city and you see that energy and you see those young professionals and you recognize that intellectual capital is going to attract companies and jobs, that to me is what I am most proud of. I mean, there's a lot of brick and mortar things, parks and the Riverwalk and what Jeff Finnick is doing now and what's happening out here in Ybor City and, the infrastructure improvements we made in East Tampa and West Tampa and North Tampa. But it's that spirit, that uniquely Tampanian swagger that allows us to believe that not only can we succeed at anything we try, but the best is yet to come, that we are not done as a city. Now, my job was to turn it over to your generation, and your generation is going to take us to the next level. But, yeah, it's so exciting to know that my kids now potentially will come home,
right?
After they go to college and do their thing. And this will be an exciting place for them.
Tell me, what's your plan to get your arms around turning St. Pete, South St. Pete, into a vibrant part of the city?
Well, I talk about this all the time, Representative Shaw.
If you don't stop calling me representative, if you don't start calling me Shaw.
Honor to whom honor is
Call
due.
me Sean, brother. That's how you honor me, please.
All right, Sean. I grew up in South St. Pete. I attended Melrose Elementary in the last year of segregated schools in 1970. And having grown up there, the one thing that I've seen is, like you said, politicians tend to talk about change in St. Pete, but I don't see them talking to the citizens of St. Pete in the community. And that absolutely has to happen. When we created the South St. Petersburg CRA, which was the first community redevelopment area ever in Pinellas County's history that wasn't in a downtown, we did that by working with folks like Gypsy Gallardo, Carl Nurse. We had forums at PTEC with hundreds of folks there to say, look, we've got an opportunity now to change county policy, to actually have a ongoing revenue source for 30 years that can address poverty in one of the largest areas of growing poverty in the county. We conducted a study that showed 5 areas of increasing poverty at the county level, and the largest one was in South St. Pete. And that gave us the rationale to change county policy and create that. So over the next 25 years remaining, it's going to produce well over $100 million that can be used for education, for job training, to help folks stay in their homes, for affordable housing. I want to use it in an innovative way to connect young people with opportunity.
These battles, the battles aren't over. Let me ask you about this, because I've always heard stories of what it was like for my father practicing law as a young black man when there weren't but 20 lawyers that were black around the state. What was it like for you practicing as a young black woman? What was it like?
Well, this was 1969, 1970, and I was the first black woman lawyer here in Hillsborough County to practice law. I came home all idealistic, oh, I'm going to practice law and get me a job somewhere and blah, blah, blah. Not one door opened for me everywhere I went. Arthenia Joyner couldn't get a job anywhere. You know, it's like you almost between a secretary and a paralegal is what I was offered. And I said, oh, hell, if I'm going to do that, I'll work for me before I'll work for somebody else and less than what I am, because I passed the bar and I can practice law as well as others. So my dad and I sat down and talked, and he said, well, it looks like it's on you to make the move. And that was how I got started. But young people need to know that the history of this community, the outstanding things that so many blacks have done, and also decide what it is their purpose in life is. What is your purpose? What is it that you want to leave behind? What is it that you want to champion? What do you want your legacy to be? These are things that need to be taken seriously.
Audience, if you didn't hear anything else that you've heard prior to that, the advocacy question that he told you to ask, if you are having a premature child or you're getting indications that might be the case, ask the hospital if they have donor milk, and if they don't, you need to make a serious decision about whether you think it's
Or
safe.
alternatively, if they don't have a donor milk bank accessible, ask for
Prolacta, sorry.
which is made from mom's milk, human milk, not cow's milk. It's more expensive.
If I ask the hospital, does your formula or what you're feeding my child have cow's milk in it? Are they going to know? Are they going to tell the truth? Are they going to say
That's a very good question. They may not know themselves.
Bingo.
It says human milk formula on it, and a nurse that's going to be, transitioning the baby home maybe, and they want to get the baby out as fast as possible because they've been in the NICU too long, we'll just switch them to this formula, and they read it, and they may not even know themselves. And like Stephen said, there is no big black box warning that says do not feed this to a premature infant, especially if the infant is fed enterically, which is a big fancy word meaning through the stomach, because little infants, little babies that are premature, they can't get the suck and the swallow at the same time. So you don't want them to choke. So you feed them through their tummy. And if you have a baby that's premature that needs to be fed through the tummy, you cannot feed that baby cow's milk. It is unsafe. It is dangerous. It is inherently dangerous. And these companies, they knew it.
As we have our last few minutes here, kind of just give your vision of your governor's campaign and what you see Florida under the second iteration of a Crist administration.
Well, Crist 2.0 is going to be more of what it was before. And this week's a good example of it, I think, Sean. We're touring the state, meeting with minorities all over Florida. As I said, I just finished a meeting in North Miami with a group of Haitian leaders, going to be going to Jacksonville this afternoon. Followed up by a trip to Pensacola, talking about justice for all and making sure that we have a justice system that respects all. You know this better than anyone, but for far too long, disproportionately, people of color, black and brown people have not been treated well by our criminal justice system. We've got to fix that. We've got to make sure that we're focused on doing things that restore people, that restore their rights. Give them the opportunity, as I had the privilege to do, and we talked about earlier, getting 155,000, former felons re-entering citizens, giving them the opportunity to get their lives back and the opportunity to be whole again. As I said, who doesn't deserve second chances? And it's time for that to come again. And so that's what this campaign is all about. It's doing the right thing, respecting our teachers and our public education system, funding it appropriately instead of 47th in the country, making sure that, when you come to prescription drugs, they're not the most expensive in the world, that we get reduced prices, making sure that we expand Medicaid, giving 800,000 of our fellow Floridians health care that they deserve just by the governor saying yes. These things are not that hard to do, but you got to be motivated to do what's right for your fellow man and your fellow woman. That's what the Chris administration will do. And I know it will do it with your help, Sean. And God bless you for having me on today.
No, of course.
I'm deeply grateful,
No,
sir.
I appreciate you being on, and thank you. And keep your travels. Tell Duval County, my birth county, I said hi, and I'll see you next time. Thank you, Governor. I'm here with Vincent Dolan. Vinny, thank you for being here. You are the executive director of Spinalcord.com. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit, but I just want to tell everybody that's watching and listening, Vinny wears a lot of hats here at the firm. He is an integral part of all the good stuff we do here. So I'm thankful that he's on the show with us, and we're gonna get into one of the hats he wears, and that is as executive director of Spinalcord.com. So tell us, what is Spinalcord.com?
Yeah, I mean, I do wear a lot of hats, and I appreciate you having me on here, but Spinalcord.com is probably what I'm most passionate about. It's what I spend most of my day working on, and it is a resource-based website for individuals and families that have had a spinal cord or other catastrophic injury. So it includes all kinds of resources, blogs, podcasts, things like that, that talk about life after spinal cord injury. It gives them insight into what they can see. But more importantly, it connects them with the resources they need to move forward. And those resources can be things like support groups, activity-based therapy centers, or the best rehabs around the country. Because when a spinal cord injury in particular hits, families are left scrambling. You know, the goal is, hey, is my loved one going to live? And that can last for hours, or days, or weeks. And during that time, people aren't getting information. They don't know what to do. It's just a focus on, how do I live? They hear things, doctors tell them things, but it goes in one ear and out the other. And at some point, people come out of this haze and they start realizing, what does all this mean? What have I been told? What is a C-level injury? You know, the doctor said my loved one isn't going to walk, but what does all that mean? And so we want to make sure that we connect them with those resources to help them.
There ain't a lot of firms like this run like this. What's it like? Do you have any, is it any differences in how you interact with lawyers, or, because, you know, lawyers are kind of old fashioned sometimes. There's always a story of the male lawyer walking in and there's a female in the room and they assume that's the court reporter and not opposing counsel. I mean, but what's it like running this firm and being one of the rare women run firms around?
You know, it's the whole legal profession has definitely grown in the last at least even 10 years. Certainly you go further back from that and ask Arthenia, better stories than I've got for sure. But I can tell you, at least in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of progress with women in law. Particularly here in Hillsborough County, we now have more female judges than male judges, and that helps immensely, right? It's no longer a situation where we walk in and we are the only female in the room, maybe but for the court reporter. So it's getting better. In general, outside of out of these four walls. In these four walls, it's the men are the outsiders.
Right. I don't mind it.
Sean knows all about it. And it's great. We have a very open dynamic. We are probably a louder and more boisterous office than,
it rocks.
than most. You know, we chat a lot and our walls are thin, or maybe we're just that loud. I'm not sure. But the communication between all of us is awesome. And I think that a lot of it is just, it's a more comfortable, open communication environment. Maybe it's Sylvia's psychology background. I don't know. But I think we have a really good vibe between all of us, and really just we make fun with the job. It's a difficult job. It's a stressful job, but all of us getting along and making the most of it, I think changes our day-to-day immensely.
I mean, we all did defense work for a little while, and I just thought that was a job. And when you get to the plaintiff side, it feels much more like a calling because of the clients you're helping. You're looking people in their face. You're not looking a big corporate representative who's trying to kind of screw somebody. You're looking for someone who's had a problem, who's had a crisis, who's probably coming to you at one of the worst times in their life. And they're coming to you, Sylvia, like you said, to solve a problem. And you're now fighting on behalf of that person. You're fighting the biggest, baddest things that are out there, which are, insurance companies and big businesses and things like that. And that's why it's so fun to do this, just because it's the David versus Goliath. And I like being David at this point. Dr. Brown, I want to talk about your organization, Tampa Bay Healthcare Collaborative, of which you are the executive director, right?
Correct.
What is the Tampa Bay Healthcare Collaborative, and what do you all do?
We are a member-driven nonprofit, and essentially what we do is we we connect the health equity ecosystem through in-person and tech-enabled solutions so that we can encourage collaboration toward advancing community well-being. I could say so much more, but
Well,
that's it in a
I'm gonna
nutshell.
drill down because that was a
Okay.
lot. That was a lot there. You sounded like a lawyer there. But I want to ask, for the benefit of the audience, what is health equity?
Oh, that's good. Um, hmm. I simply like to say community well-being because you can't have community well-being without health equity. And when you do have health equity, that means that everyone, every single person, has access to having their best health possible.
Regardless of color,
Zip code,
regardless of income,
socioeconomic
regardless
status.
of
There
background.
you
That's
go.
what equity is, right?
All of it.
Everybody is entitled. And I saw this
Yes.
on your website.
Yeah.
Healthcare is a human right.
Yes.
No, those of us in this place right now believe that. Some might not, but the ones on this show right now,
Absolutely.
we do. And so the equity is making sure everybody has access to good health incomes regardless of zip code. And we know that that does not exist. What are you thankful for during this kind of season of being thankful and Thanksgiving and all that good stuff?
My spiritual growth. That's what I'm thankful for. Um, I used to, so I don't know if I said this already, originally born and raised Brooklyn, New York, right? And I am the child of immigrants. My whole family's Jamaican. And so because of that, I was very much I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to make things happen. I'm going to get my grind on, I get my hustle on, all that. And what I realized was that's tiring. That's tiring. There's more of a flow of life that I can go with, and surrendering to what's being put before me, and that's more joyful.
And we're gonna end right there because we ain't topping that. Al, I just want to talk about, first of all, you are the local president of the Pi Iota chapter here of Omega Psi Phi, which essentially means you're the head of the local chapter of a fraternity. And I just want to know what is your vision for what the fraternity is going to do locally, has done locally. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of yours, and I've seen us do some new things and take on some new challenges than we have before. Tell me your vision and kind of how your leadership, no, don't talk about your leadership style, never mind. Talk about your vision for the fraternity locally and what the kind of the things we do and stuff like that.
I think we might suspend you first, but more importantly is giving back. I think Omega is about service, and that's been the core principles of it. You've been a good servant in the community. I remember your various races, even ascending. You know, you made us proud. So
I appreciate that.
I'm glad to see your curly hair, and we're gonna laugh a little bit, you know, because we're here. We're not gonna be too serious.
You're gonna have some abilities to say some things no one else will, but
absolutely,
we'll give you that. We'll give you that freedom, and I know because I participated in our mentor program over at Just Elementary. I know that we've got the cleanup going on. Talk about some of those individual programs, the blood drive, and all those good things.
So I believe Brother Shaka Jasper has been the chair of our social action under the leadership of our Vice Boss, Shakoy Blunt. Some of the things that's going on is, community engagement. We're trying to get out there, utilizing platforms as this, letting our family, our village know that we're here to serve. Omega's built on service. If you think about the rich history in Tampa alone, being where we are, but it's the work. So enjoying that work, feasting in the labor, but really focusing on the community and figuring out how to uplift. I mean, yeah, we have differences and we have different approaches and how we ascertain whatever that success may be as you look at success. And, you know, just really proud and humbled to sit here, although I'd rather you sit in this seat than me.
No, it's Sean Shaw Show, Vanguards of Democracy. Sherry, I want to thank you for coming. It is clear why we get all these conventions, and it's because of you and how good you are at your job and how passionate you are about it. But I want to ask you, we're in the New Year's season. Give me one resolution. I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me one New Year's resolution before we wrap up that you got.
You know, I am very, very spiritual. I just want to be my resolution that I want to be a blessing to my community. I want to use my gift as a blessing to my community, to all of us, and all of us diversity and multicultural and um support everybody and we all come together. So that's my resolution, that we all come together and that I can use my gift to be an impact for this community. It's not about me. I was thinking about Martin Luther King. I want to serve humanity, not me.
Well, you are a blessing to this community, and we love you and we thank you. So we're going to wrap up now. I got one of these headshots for you, so you can
Okay.
sign and we can put you on the wall of fame here. But I want
Oh
to
my
thank you for
God.
thank
Okay.
you for coming and talking to the listeners and talking to so the viewers could see. But I appreciate it, and I want to thank you for all you do. Vanguards of Democracy is funded and produced by Vanguard Attorneys, a local personal injury law firm serving the Tampa Bay area with ingenuity and an indomitable work ethic. Don't forget to follow Vanguards of Democracy on YouTube or download episodes on your favorite podcast streaming services like iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And lastly, we're excited to announce that we're launching our new landing page, www.vanguardsofdemocracy.com, where you'll be able to ask questions, recommend guests or topics, and stay up to date with news and announcements. It'll be great. If you know how to bookmark a website, this is the one that'll make it worth it. Thank you.